Yeah, so first things first, how are you?
Yeah, good, good. We've just been doing interviews and we were in Paris yesterday and Amsterdam today, Madrid tonight. So it's pretty hectic, you know?
This album, Worldwide Pop, in the past 2 years, what were your thoughts on making an album in that time? Because I can imagine it's a crazy time to work on music and be creative.
Well, for me, I spent the majority of my time working on the album artwork.
Okay.
I spent like 3 years on it. Basically 9 to 5, probably longer, just every single day painting. So that was a huge project for me. I probably, in terms of like hours, I spent more hours working on the artwork than the music.
Okay.
Yeah, but because the bones of the track were kind of already there end of 2019, most of the songs. And during the pandemic, we were all kind of apart again. So we had just had so much time, and Domino was willing to, be like, they were like, yeah, why don't you guys maybe work with some cool producers that you like or whatever. And we're like, okay, cool. And so we just spent like a year or two just tweaking everything, and I was working on the album artwork. And
there's a saying that like art never gets finished, it just gets taken away from you. And the funny thing is that usually that's true. Like you get to a point where it's like I think all artists, you could tweak things endlessly, right? You could just keep on working on things forever, right? And never be satisfied with it, and never. There's artists that do that, like, there's that band, the Lars, there she goes again. Apparently that guy wrote that song and it was a hit, and then he was like never going to release an album, and then the label just took like his demos and released that as an album, and then that album's great as well. But apparently that's the reason he's never released an album again. So if you're a really crazy artist, you can work on things forever. And that's the funny thing with the pandemic, is that it actually gave us the time to just keep on working on things. And without that time, Orono probably wouldn't have been able to finish the artwork and stuff. And for us, like we could have probably got a version of the album together even in 2020, but it wouldn't have been as realized as it is. We wouldn't have had the space to have gone deep on it and then have a bit of time to reflect on it and then come back to it with fresh ears and stuff. Like all of that is quite a unique experience, because we're more used to the first album. We did that in 6 months, and the whole album was written and produced and completed in a space of 6 months, which was way more intense. Whereas this time around, it gave us time to reflect and think and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, quite an interesting experience.
Well, one thing I would like to ask about the first album was, am I right in saying that the album was finished before the entire band kind of met each other in one room?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
So yeah, that's crazy to think about, because obviously in the past 2 years nobody could be in the same room and all that stuff. So you kind of had a head start in that respect then.
I've been saying that we did the first lockdown album like 2 years before COVID was even a thing.
But in the meantime, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you all started living together in London, am I right?
We did, yeah. That was in the first album. So we haven't lived together now for a few years.
Okay.
So we kind of dissolved that flat around summer 2019, I think it was. And then we all went, we'd been on the road together for 2 years straight, and then living together. And then, we were either living together in a tour bus or in an overcrowded house in East London. And so it got to a point where we were just like, for our own sanity, let's at least get our own living spaces. So luckily we did that before COVID hit. So we weren't all locked down in the same house together. I feel like we would have actually just gone insane if that had happened. We all love each other and stuff, but it's like, you can't, that would be too much.
But in terms of the creative process then, what do you prefer as a group? Do you prefer being in the same room and kind of hashing it out, or do you like the fact that you can come up with something on your own and then kind of share it with the group?
I think we maybe prefer just working on things alone, but then like getting together and like fleshing things out. But we do both. We like both.
Okay.
We just happen to do the solo thing a bit more.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think that's just because we just like to have our own. Yeah, it's circumstantial, but it's also we've all kind of learned to make music that way, you know. In our rooms, trial and error until you get it right, and that whole thing of you don't have to feel as uncomfortable when you're on your own. Like if it takes me 30 takes to get the guitar part right, rather than everyone else being in the room and having to suffer through me getting it wrong 29 times. I feel there's less pressure that way as well. But that said, sometimes you're just in the right zone, and it's cool to be in the same room and jam it out. And we did that a few times on this record, where some songs started as instrumental jams, and then we take it away and then work on it separately and pull it all together at the end. So it was a bit more of a hybrid this time around than the first album, but still pretty reasonably remote too.
Right. I can imagine, I don't know if this is still the case, but whenever you come up with an idea, and you guys have always had a wealth of ideas, and ideas coming from left of center and all that kind of stuff, when you have to present it then to the group, is that still a nerve-wracking thing, or are you so entwined together that it's not? It's
always like a fun thing.
Yeah.
We like each other's work, and we trust each other's like artistic visions, and we're more excited about where each idea can, what they can blossom into by sharing and collaborating. So it's never really a nervous thing.
And I don't think anyone's particularly precious about it either. Like we're all pretty open to trying something and it not working. So in that sense, I mean, I've been in like groups when I was younger where it's like, tried to work with people and they can be quite like sensitive about whether or not their idea, you know what I mean? Like maybe you'll be jamming with a drummer and they're playing a beat and you're like, that beat isn't working, man. And then they get really upset and stubborn. That happens with some people, but none of us are really like that. We're all reasonably open to trying something and it being like, I don't know if that quite is right. And not getting upset about that and being like, okay, cool, let's try something else then.
How would you describe the chemistry between the band members then? Because you all seem to come from creatively different places. You all have your own influences, I suppose, but it all kind of blends together into this one thing. So how do you see that chemistry between the members?
I think we have kind of we like to approach things with a sense of humor, and I think that kind of gets us together.
Blends it all together quite well, and I think we all have some really core kind of philosophies that we share. So even if there are like different tastes and stuff, the core thing of like liking songs that are quite catchy and wanting things to. I don't know, just kind of we've got similar instincts in that regard. We're all quite chilled out people as well. So it means that we're not butting heads. It's not like, there's no kind of tension there. And it makes it reasonably easy. And then that way, if somebody brings an idea that's something, the charm of it is to do something where if someone brings an idea that is something you wouldn't have thought to do yourself, it makes it better, And so that open-minded approach is just kind of core to the band, I think. You
mentioned now with the pandemic having more time than usual to work on the album. How much did the album change from those initial ideas you had, even I suppose before the pandemic hit, and then spending so much time on it? And was there a moment where you kind of collectively had to say, as you mentioned before, like, let's take our hands off it because we can continue this forever?
I think it just got more refined. I don't think it changed fundamentally, did it really? Okay. There were a couple of songs that weren't even written prior to that point. So we definitely added a couple, we added more as we went. And then we stripped some things away and added, it was kind of just exploring the form of the songs. The songs themselves, I mean, they're all quite simple 3-chord kind of affairs. Like we've been playing them acoustically and it recently just figuring them out. And they're really simple songs at the core. So it's more about like finding the space, the sonic space for them, and
Sure.
exploring within that sonic space rather than any like fundamental changes to the core
Okay.
sound of it. You know, there were like lyric refinements, and there's like production refinements and all that sort of thing. We actually brought in a couple of cool producer guys as well. Like one guy, Stuart Price, who's amazing. He worked on things by like The Killers and Madonna and Dua Lipa and stuff. He's got a really impressive back catalogue. We bounced ideas off him. I think 7 songs in the end he worked with us on. Yeah, he was involved in Levitating, for example. So he's produced some big pop hits, and so it was great to get his ear involved, because it was like us sending him songs that were already written, really, and we'd done versions of them, and him just kind of helping us refine that and bouncing ideas off him, and him going, what about this? And us either being like, I don't know, or yeah, let's do it. And so kind of collaborating with his much more professional ear than ours to refine it into what you hear now. So if you'd heard our kind of drafts at the start of 2020 or whatever, it wasn't a fundamentally different album, but it was a far less realized album, if that makes sense.
Right.
It's kind of like a demo draft of what you now hear.
If we take the fundamentals of these songs, then what was there anything that you focused on specifically or honed in on this second album that you wanted to do differently, or that you wanted to focus on?
I guess we went more personal with it. Because I guess I think the first album was more observational in tone, and this album is also still very much an observational kind of album, but there's way more hints of personal vibes going on in way more than the first album.
I think both lyrically and sonically as well. Because there's points where we kind of wanted to. I'd say that with this album, we was a process of us. We identified the things about the group that are kind of almost the extreme poles of what we do well, and we wanted to really bring out all those things. So there's moments that are far more kind of intimate sounding than anything that we did on the first record, in my opinion. And then there's moments that are far bigger and more widescreen than anything that we did on the first record. And sometimes those moments are in the same song. Like I think that the song Crushed is a great example to me, where there's points where it's basically just acoustic guitar and Orono's voice. And it's, that's, is there anything more intimate than just an acoustic guitar and a voice? And then there's points where it goes into this kind of crazy Baroque, like, widescreen hi-fi instrumentals and stuff. And so we wanted to explore those kind of extremes, I think, of our collective personality.
And Orono, for you then, the lyrics with that song Crushed, what was the initial spark for the lyrics then? Because as you mentioned, that there is somewhat more of a look inside or a more personal feel to some of those songs, including Crush.
I think I made a big acquaintance with someone in somewhere, and then I was following them on Instagram, and then I stalked their Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and everything that they had online, and then I was like, wow, I'm so creepy, and but everyone does that, and they can get, you can get really obsessive with it, and with this person that doesn't actually exist, because I barely knew this guy. I only hung out with him once or twice, but anyway, that was the seed of the idea. And then I'm a huge fan of Elliott Smith, and so I wanted to do something like that, but packaged in a very obnoxious pop kind of packaging. So yeah, that was, I was thinking about Lord a lot.
Lord, in what context?
I was just he's so weird.
No, but you mentioned humor earlier, and this dichotomy between well, the lyrics and then those upbeat textures of sound, and is that something you play with as a band a lot? Because as I mentioned, you say the songs are very simple, but the textures and the sounds, that's what kind of elevates it. So are you very conscious of kind of how to set the mood or create a certain feeling to the songs?
Yeah.
I think we are. Yeah, we always want to kind of like play with the expectations of what we're doing with it, you know. And I think that those kind of juxtapositions are a perfect way to do that. A lot of my favorite artists already do that sort of thing, you know. I always think about like Pet Sounds is a perfect example of a classic record where so much of it musically is just so beautiful, and a lot of it's very major key and uplifting sounding. And then when you listen to the lyrics, it's like, you know, quite heartbreaking and melancholic. And I always like that. I always like a sense of kind of like optimistic melancholy, if that makes sense. Like, and I think a good way to achieve that is through like contrasting the musical tone and the lyrical tone, and, you know, to do that in both ways as well. Like I kind of also like kind of like happy lyrics over a more melancholic sound as well. We've not really done that much of that, but
maybe next time.
Yeah, that could be something to explore as well. Yeah.
The notion of worldwide pop, when did that come into the consciousness of the band? When did that become a phrase, so to say?
I mean, I think the ethos of the song, I think, has been there all along, but the phrase came about when we wrote it, and it was kind of like just this random, quirky, fun little song that we did. Doesn't really mean anything, but also means everything.
Yeah.
And then when we were trying to decide on like the album title, we came up with a bunch of ideas, but Worldwide Pop was just like the most simple, catchy, abstract title on the list, and it just felt right. So yeah, that became kind of like the mission statement.
Yeah, exactly. We just go with what feels right, really. Try not to overthink it and just let it lead us.
Yeah.
But the phrase what you just mentioned, it means nothing but pretty much everything at the same time. So I find that very interesting. Well, how do you perceive music in a sense? How do you, this is maybe too philosophical, but how do you perceive what you do in a way?
I mean,
it's very weird. It's a weird occupation.
Yeah, it is.
Sometimes I feel embarrassed, like when I'm filling out when I'm like entering a country and I have to fill out like my occupation and I have to write like musician.
Yeah.
I'm always kind of embarrassed because I'm like, I'm not cringe.
I've actually had times where I've been at like a party or something, like if a friend's invited me to someone's house party or something, and I meet someone, and then I'm like, oh, what do you do? And then they talk about their job, and then they're like, what do you do? And I've had times where I've just like made something up. It's way more mundane because I'm like, I feel like a wanker.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but one thing I've heard is when musicians kind of get to birthday parties and stuff, because you're away for a certain amount of time and you come back, you kind of firstly you miss a lot of stuff, but also people don't really get what it entails to be a musician.
Exactly,
Have you experienced that?
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah, I don't even get what I'm doing.
No, I mean it's it's just it's a real privilege to do what we do, and it's certainly not a thing that we're like. When I say that I feel like a wanker saying that, I don't mean it in the sense of like I'm not grateful for the opportunity to be able to do it, because I really am.
It's like talking about it to other people is cringe, because most of the time they get really interested and they're like, oh, that's cool, what's your band called? And I'm like, Superorganism. And then they look it up and they like play it for the whole party.
Yeah, and it's like please don't put it on, man.
Fucking kill myself.
Yeah, it's like I'm proud of it, but I really don't.
Yeah, you really don't have to do this right now.
I remember one time.
That's not what I'm asking.
I remember one time being in I think it was in Toronto, and weed's legal in Toronto, and so we went into a shop to get some, and the guy behind the thing in the shop, he was like, oh, what are you guys in town for and stuff, and I made the mistake of saying, oh, our band's playing a show tonight, and then he looked us up, and I think that tiny desk, I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Sure, yeah.
Popped up, and it had like loads of, it's got loads of views and stuff. And then he was like, oh wow, like, he got really interested in it. And then he put it on, and then the whole shop, it was quite busy, and I was just like, oh. And then he kind of made a real big deal out of it. And then, so we left this weed shop. I was just like, oh man, like, I just felt really, I don't know.
It's cool.
Not embarrassed, because I am proud of it.
It's cool.
No, I
when
get what you're saying.
They're impressed, and then they give you something. They're like, oh, cool. Like, here's some free stuff. I like that.
Yeah, that's definitely a perk of music.
Yeah. Lots of
final question then, because I find it very interesting the way you speak about what you do and stuff. Is I don't know, but I assume that the ambition for you guys isn't fame or fortune or all that kind of thing. So
dude, we're like full normies.
but so what do you yourselves get out of this whole process? Is it something cathartic? Is it what is kind of the thing that what's the right word, compels you to do this, the thing that keeps you, the drive, so to say?
I think it's all the free stuff and creativity. I think it's like hanging out with friends, making cool shit. That's just like, that's really fun. And like, we'd be doing that regardless of if we were getting paid or getting a bunch of free stuff. Free stuff does really help when I don't feel like being in a band, but yeah, making stuff is most of the time.
Yeah, I think for me, there's an element of like, it's definitely still ego that drives it.
Okay.
But it's the ego, I don't rest the ego in myself. I rest the ego in the thing that we create. So, I am really proud of it. And like, I'm stoked that, like, for example, in those situations, like I'm saying, when people want to go away and listen to it, and when they genuinely then love it and they're impressed by it, I'm like, that is cool. But I just don't want that to be necessarily it's not really about me.
Sure.
That's not the part that I don't find it fulfilling that they want to see my face or like think that I'm a big deal. That doesn't do anything for me. What does do it for me is the idea that they're going to go away and enjoy it and show their friends it, and it's going to mean something to them. Like, that's the thing that I want, because that's what I get from a lot of my favorite artists. Sure. I think about, like, say how like Daft Punk is not about those guys, really. I mean, you could say it's about the robots and it's about the aesthetic, but it's about the world that they've built, and it's about the art that they created and how it touches people's lives. And actually, the guys behind the masks are kind of, who cares about those guys? It doesn't matter about them. It's about the thing that they created. And I think that we strive for somewhat, not to the extreme extent that we're like wearing masks and stuff, but like, that's what we've always, that's where we place our egos in the appreciation of the art itself.
Fair enough. I have one last question, Orono, for you. What was your favorite thing that you've been given for free by being in this band?
I have maybe the one I can think of now. Ooh, actually, I'll tell you two things.
Sure.
When we went to Coachella, there was literally like a weed tent where people just go there, and
it's
it
like
has.
A palace.
It was I didn't even go. I couldn't go because I was underage.
So I went.
Yeah, and some other guys.
Like this weird mansion, and they had this thing where
in the middle of the desert.
Because it was very, very like California, because it was like, come along and meet the celebrity weed CEO. I was like, what the hell is a celebrity weed CEO? I mean, bizarre. But I went along and like, they just had like these like pyramids of joints and stuff, and then they were just like, take this. And so we got so much but we did like a 6-week tour after that, and there was so much that we had to be just giving it away to like road crew at the end of the tour. We were like, we're not gonna get through this. Like,
there's so much. It has like a mountain. It's not, and they had like drinks and cookies and gummies and so many things. So that was cool. But also my pair of Doc Marten shoes. I've had them for 4 years now. I've worn them like so many times, and they're still going strong. Got those for free in London, and I think in Camden. They literally invited us and were like, yep, pick out like a pair of shoes and we'll just give them to you. And I was like, that is so crazy, but I'll definitely take it.
I want to add one thing as well, which is a special shout out to Fender, who gave me a guitar. That's
And gave us the Malibu too, the
Yeah.
one that we've been playing.
yeah. So they're
that I
giving us a couple of
painted.
guitars.
Yeah.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah,
That's quite pretty cool. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Well, Maya, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Yeah,
Thank you, man.
very much.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Hope you have a good afternoon.